Welcome to the Biohacking Standards, your one-stop podcast where we talk about spirituality, health, and wellness, and all things new. Stick around as we delve deep into innovations to support a better you.
Hakim Isler is a former U.S. Army PSYOP Special Operations Sergeant, combat veteran, survival expert, and martial arts instructor. He is also the founder of Psi Games International. Beyond his military background as a sixth-degree black belt in Tushindu modern ninjutsu, Hakim is a literal ninja. Today, Hakim is best known for bridging the worlds of military training, martial arts, human performance, consciousness exploration, and Psi research. Through the Psi Games, he is helping bring practices such as remote viewing, mind sight, precognition, and other human potential disciplines into a more public, experiential, and measurable framework. Hakim serves on advisory boards connected to consciousness research and advocates for making extraordinary human capabilities more accessible, ethical, and practical for everyday people. Let's welcome Hakim Isler to the show. Imagine if you could go back to the early days of companies like Apple, Tesla, or SpaceX, not because of the products they were selling at the time, but because you believed in the future they were trying to build. That's what Igniton is all about. Yes, today we create premium wellness products designed to support cognition, longevity, and restorative sleep and skin. And they're all backed by carefully selected ingredients and supported by clinical research. But for us, they're only the beginning. At Igniton, we believe the future of human wellness will be shaped not only by chemistry, but by a deeper understanding of how living systems organize, communicate, and maintain coherence. We're investing in the science, the research, and the technologies that could one day expand how we think about recovery, performance, and healthy aging. Every bottle we ship today helps fund that journey. When you choose Igni Cognition, Igni Longevity, Igni REM Sleep, or Igni Peptide Eye Serum, you're not simply buying a supplement. You're joining a community that believes the next great frontier in wellness is still waiting to be discovered. Some companies sell products, others build the future. We intend to do both. Learn more about Igniton's mission, explore the science, and become part of the Igniton community at igniton.com by using code ASHLEY to save 15% on your first purchase. That's igniton.com and code ASHLEY for 15% off without a subscription. Igniton is building the future of quantum wellness. Igniton, born from light, backed by science. Hakim Isler, thank you so much for joining the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
It's great to meet you, and thank you for taking the time and dealing with the technical difficulties we're both facing this morning. So thank you.
Yeah. It always seems like maybe our conversation is going to be so great that, some forces are out there messing with us. Some gremlins are trying to mess with our ability to communicate.
That's what's going on. So we'll make do, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited to talk to you. Maybe before we kind of get into questions and Q&A, why don't you just tell our audience a little bit about your background, who you are, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, so now these days, people call me like the Professor Xavier of the real world. So building the X-Men. So, and I like to say, and my team calls me the founding steward of the Psi Games, which is equivalent to like the Psychic Olympics. It's a conference and competition where we learn how to do, and we get inspired by people who can, have different levels of Psi functioning. So, it's a really cool experience, a really cool event. It's bringing people together from all over the world around the idea of Psi development and Psi abilities. And, as far as my background is concerned, I moved in 1999 to train in the ninja martial arts. Been doing that for a long time. So people get really weirded out when they hear I'm a ninja, and then
a literal ninja.
Yeah. And then joined special operations community and, some in the early 2000s, and went to war and did all that stuff. Got out, started a martial arts school. Also started helping with survival stuff at a friend of mine's business, and then ended up on Naked and Afraid, the television show. Did that, did a bunch of other survival shows, ended up purchasing my own land, did a lot of wilderness training, mindfulness meditations, got involved in herbal medicine, went to school for integrative health sciences, got a degree in herbal medicine, then went to a yoga program, got really deeply immersed in yoga. Been doing that for the last 6 years. The full breath of yoga, not asana practice, which is just the poses, but the meditative aspects, the breathing aspects, the pranayama, and all that stuff. And then in the midst of all of this, started diving deep in the study of psi phenomenon. So went out and trained with all of the different, teachers of remote viewing that are part of the original military program, got involved in mind sight, the ability to see without your eyes, and went to Monroe, started the gateway process and the things that come with that. And throughout all of this process, this idea of this Psi Games came up as a way to bring together our communities as a whole, as the species, and help us develop and empower us to become the full actualized versions of ourselves, tapping into these deeper potentials that we all have and doing it in a loving, compassionate, and ethical way so that we can raise up the species to our next level.
Wow, a lot to unpack there. It's your background is phenomenal. How did I guess from a military perspective, right? Let's start there. What you started? Well, I guess first of all, you started as a ninja outside of the military. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
So is that a
yeah.
literal training program to become a ninja? That's like a real
Yeah.
process?
Yeah, it's so my teacher was the first American to go to Japan and study the ninja system and bring it back to America in the 70s, and he's responsible for the ninja boom of the late 70s, 80s. And I found him. I had already been training in martial arts for 20 years or close to by the time I found him. And I decided I wanted to kind of dedicate my life to that. So I packed up everything. I lived in New Jersey at the time. I packed up everything when I was 21 and moved to Ohio, of all places, to train with him and then become one of his students. And I've been doing that now for 27 years. And that was basically the gist. And I've also, during that time, I ended up going to executive protection school. That was one thing I missed. I became a certified bodyguard and was learning those aspects, and then joined the Army and became a special operator.
So are there other like in your Army experience, were you the only ninja that was part of that, or was there?
Well, oddly enough, I mean, we had the original Army Combatives program. This is before what we have today, modern Army Combatives. Before that, the original program had elements of ninjutsu in it. And then there were people who had trained with my teacher who joined the Army and had helped build the Army Combatives program. And then also the Marines program, their martial arts system. There's a guy named Button Malmstrom or not Button Malmstrom, Jack Coban, who became very instrumental in building their martial arts program, and he added some of the combative aspects of ninjutsu. So ninjutsu is a very broad system, and primarily it was about espionage and being able to stay out of danger because the ninja people just didn't have enough resources to just fight people. Like the samurai were just a warrior class, and they wanted to fight and they wanted to die in battle, and the ninja didn't have those resources. So they learned other ways to really deal with conflict. And so their best way was to gather information and be invisible to the danger that was looking for them. And so that was their primary. So psychological warfare and understanding that was really primary for them. And so and that's what led me and intrigued me about going into the Army, where I did what they call PSYOP, which is psychological operations. And so, yeah, that gives you a
So
little
what does that
background.
involve? What can you tell us about psyops that, to kind of explain what that means to the,
Yeah,
to
so PSYOP basically is like a high level marketing. It's like a very intriguing position, because what you're trying to do is you have different levels. You have strategic, operational, and tactical. PSYOP. And so the idea is that you have these different mission sets. And so it might just be changing the hearts and minds of people towards, you know, uh, forming stronger communities so they can rebuild after disaster. Or maybe it is that you have like you know, some sort of tyrant or something running a particular area, and you need the people to kind of understand like their lives would be better without that person. And so how do they put somebody else in power in that particular situation? So there are a bunch of different reasons why you would use PSYOP. And I have a book that'll be out in just over a month, where it tells people and it teaches people how to really understand PSYOP in the real world and how to help them make very informed, wiser decisions and take back control of their own minds and their own hearts instead of having these algorithms and these politicians kind of control their hearts and minds. So, yeah.
That's where I was going to go next, actually, is like, are we living in this big psyop here in the United States with our media?
I mean, it's everywhere. It's not just the United States, but for us who live here, yeah, absolutely. PSYOP could be good or bad. It's not really either or, but it could be used for, nefarious reasons. And so there are quite a few PSYOPs going on, or psychological operation, focuses going on right now. And so it's really sad to see. And, it's tough for the average person to really understand that they're involved or trapped in this cycle, and so, yeah, it's going on a lot right now.
So is there something, are some people more susceptible to the negative aspects? I mean, obviously it could be used for good, I'm assuming too, but are certain people more susceptible to, following along? Is it almost like being, hypnotized in a way?
Yeah, I think everybody is. It's what makes PSYOP what makes it so potentially insidious is that the goal is to find the hook of the audience that you're targeting. So if that's the case, then everybody has a hook. Everybody's susceptible to something. And so it's
Right.
not like a cookie cutter thing. It really is tailored to the audience that you're speaking to. So in that particular instance, everyone's vulnerable because everyone has a hook. And that's one of the first things we learn as PSYOP specialists is that, me, you, even though we know these principles, it doesn't put us above it, right? So like if you ever meet like a psychiatrist and they a family therapist or something like that, they're like talking to you about how to keep your family in order and all this stuff, and then you meet their family and it's pure chaos. So it's like
Right.
it's like, wait a minute, you know all the tactics, why are you not using these? And that's because everybody has a hook, and the family structure is an emotional hook for that person. So it's easy for them to talk to somebody else about their family because they don't have the attachment of the emotions. But then when it comes to them working with their own family, all these emotions get involved. And so they have trouble doing that. So I say that to say that even if you know the principles, it's still hard to overcome them, because everyone's susceptible at some level. You just, a good PSYOP person or a good PSYOP group would figure out the hooks of that community, and then that's how they operate, you know? And so you
So
can use that for good or bad. Like, for instance, a lot of people will claim, oh, Hakim, he used to be in the government and he's a PSYOP guy. He's trying to like figure out who the psychic people are and steal them and so on and so forth. And for me, it's just the opposite. And the only way people will know that is they have to see my intentions and my actions over time. I get that. But because I've been trained in this, I recognize that one of the things that is keeping us weak in this space as a community is that we're so scared to come together. We're so scared to support each other because of these things that have happened to other people in the past, where people were isolated and taken advantage of for their psychic potential. And so I'm saying we need to be doing just the opposite. We need to be unifying and coming together, because that's when we're going to be the strongest and we can protect and take care of each other. And so when we don't do that, then we are susceptible. And so I see that, psyop going on where, it's almost like an abusive relationship where one of the tactics is to isolate the individual from the people who can help them see the light, and so by making people afraid to come together, they think that they're being protected, but really they're being more isolated and vulnerable that way. And so, I kind of digress. I'm going off on a tangent, but that's
No, it's
one of the
okay.
things that I see. Yeah.
That's totally okay. I mean, it's kind of like there's a little bit of a fear there, I think, from a leadership perspective, because a lot of our leaders over the course of time who have tried to do that, at least, if we believe if we can believe anything from history, I don't know if we can, but some of the leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and
Mhm.
the Kennedy brothers, Bob Marley,
Yeah.
all these folks were trying to say the exact same thing that you just said, and they're all killed.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
right. So, I mean, does that play into the grand psyop to keep leaders suppressed?
Yeah, I think that I definitely think that. I think that's one way to do it is that, these groups out there who don't want this information to come out um try to suppress it. I think and these were very in those times there were very multi-leveled um mechanisms for control of society to a very high degree. I think where it might be a little different now is that finally there's so many people on so many different fronts coming out about we are more than our physical bodies. There are NHI, there are non-human intelligences that are here. There are UAPs that are now being talked about in the government. There's a spiritual reawakening and renaissance that's happening right now for so many people. Whereas back in those days, that was trying to happen, but there was a big push for that not to happen by the people in charge. And so, yeah, I definitely feel like now is the time, and that's where you know, I'm not the only one. I may be the only person in this particular space talking about this thing, but I'm sure I won't be that forever. And then, but there's people talking about these things in different circles, whether it be in AI, whether it be in, non-human intelligence, whether it be in UAPs. So I think in that way, this is a good time for people who want to talk about this stuff to really come out and really share because there are so many other people doing the same right now.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and thank God for that. Um, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, like, your training, and you've kind of extended this into consciousness research
Mhm.
from what I've learned about you just by doing a little research. What experiences that you've seen or personally had convince you that human potential extends really beyond what conventional science currently recognizes?
Yeah, so I had a myriad of instances when I was younger, but three that I remember that I talk about the most on podcasts and stuff is that when I was younger, around between the ages of 8 and 9, I had dreamt the lotto numbers, and my mom played them locally, but they came out nationally. So that was like one major thing because anybody who's in this space knows that like coming up with the lottery numbers is one of the hardest things to do in this space. And so the fact that I had did that showed my mom like something was up. During that same time, another instance that happened was my mom had asked me, her and my aunt were talking, and then I came in the room and I was playing, and they said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I stuck my chest out, and she said, with like complete and total confidence, like it was going to happen tomorrow. And I had already done all these things to like be in this position. She said, I looked at her and I said, I'm going to be a ninja. Right. And they thought it was cute and they laughed, and actually, I totally forgot about that story. And then when I was coming to her in my 20s at 21 saying, "Hey, I'm gonna move to Ohio to go and train with this ninja guy," she was just shocked. She said the thing and that came to her was immediately she got the moment in her mind, she remembered that moment in her mind when I was a young boy telling her I was going to be a ninja. And she said, "Do you remember you told me this when you were 9?" I said, "No, I don't remember that at all." And she said, "Yeah, you said it so matter of factly." And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then wild that for the last 18 years, what I've done for a living is I run a ninja martial arts school, you know, and that's 18 years of my life. So it's just like wild that that would happen, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, so I knew that. So I knew something was up. And then the final story was I was at the playground and during recess when they still had that. And
Those were
I'm
the
waiting.
days.
Yeah, those were the days. I'm waiting in line. And basically it wasn't really a game. It was like everybody got a chance to try to hit the ball, right? So you go up to bat, you grab a baseball bat, somebody pitches it, you try to hit it, and then you move on to the line again, you know? And so I go up, I'm like 2 lines or 2 people away from my turn. And I get a very clear voice in my head that says, "Move now." And so I don't know, I just follow it. I get out of line, I move 2 people down in the line, which puts me now 4 behind the getting the bat, and everybody's looking at me weird, like, what are you doing?" Like you were just up to bat and only 2, and now you're further back. I didn't say anything. I just got in line. And the guy who was up to bat dropped the baseball bat, picks it up. He gets ready to swing. He swings the baseball bat, misses the ball. It slips out of his hand and it smashes the kid in the forehead that was standing who took my spot. And I was just in shock. The kid screaming, blood shooting out of his head. Everybody runs to him. And all I could think was like, I was just standing there, like that thing something told me to move, and I moved, and that would have been me. And I just remember how wild that was for me. Even so, it was so profound that I remember it to this day. And I mean, that was 41 years ago that happened.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just a wild story. So when I think about those things, um, then it really clearly just lets you know their validation for me that something more was going on. Now, as an adult, I've had all of these remote viewing experiences and mindsight experiences, so I definitely can't deny it now unless I'm just being stubborn, you know. But it's
Right.
real. It's my life. It's other people's lives. I've seen them do it. So yeah, it's there.
So are there other folks in your family that have had these experiences as well, or are you the only one?
So my family is very religious, and so it's tough to have that conversation with them. There have been conversations about um, the Holy Ghost coming to people in my family and giving them certain information and stuff. And I would say that those moments are certain levels of psi functioning. I don't want to rule out that there's an entity or an energy that we call the Holy Ghost that's coming to people and doing stuff. But so I would have to say yeah, but my mom gets very uncomfortable talking about it, so we haven't really had any deep conversations about it. But she's quick to acknowledge that there are people in her church family that come that do talks that are prophets and so on and so forth, and they prophesy over people. So she definitely believes in it. It's just a different way in which she talks about it.
So why is that? Do you think that is hard and difficult? Because your mom's not alone. There's a lot of folks that are, religious that have a hard time grasping this. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so we're a tribal people, and we as a culture or as a people all around the world, we tend to, because we're tribal and because our brain likes patterns, we tend to want to be in groups that are like us. And then part of being in a group that's like us is that we pattern the same, right? And so anyone who doesn't fit that pattern then immediately becomes an other, and then they become not part of our tribe. And so it's just all that conflict about the way our brain loves to operate in order to be safe in the world. And that might be, people have speculated that that's a very primal thing, right? So the way we stayed alive when all of these things wanted to kill us is that we had to join a group. Then as part of that group, we had to all do the same thing. And anything that didn't pattern well was a threat to our ability to stay alive. So people who weren't following the patterns, things that weren't following the patterns could be potentially threats to our life. And so we didn't want to be around them. We didn't want to allow those things in. And so I think that's what's happening on a very base level for all these different communities who are like, my community's right, your community's wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. And really, the truth is, we don't know. We're still discovering all the time. I mean, there was one point in time that we were like, the sun revolves around the earth, and anything to think differently would mean death. And people, I think, I can't remember the famous scholar, but I think he either was sentenced to death or almost died, or one or the other. The guy who proposed that the earth actually revolves around the sun. So you just think about something like that, and you're just saying to yourself, like, that's wild that this guy just even proposing the theory was enough to almost get him killed. So yeah, I think that's where we are. We just tend to be that way until more people start to acknowledge something, and then we start to say, oh, well, maybe it's not so,
Yeah.
So and we're discovering those things all the time. So the person who's a scientist or a skeptic who's not willing to change when they have evidence that's contrary to what they believe is, in my opinion, not truly a scientist or a skeptic.
Bingo, my friend. I've said that I've said that for years, man. Any scientist who doesn't want to really understand how something else can change isn't really a scientist.
Yeah.
It's crazy that that's viewed the other way, and that scientists can just say this is how it is, and not be open to, new evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
They're
is part of this
protecting the status quo because that's their tribe, right? That's their patterning. They're just
right.
like, oh, we're in the tribe of believing this way. It allows me to be successful. It allows me to pay for food for my family. It allows me for people to look at me as an authority. And now you come in and you're threatening all that, and you're an enemy now. Even though I'm not saying that, somewhere deep inside, I feel that way because of these different patterns, instead of just saying, hey, maybe this person could be right. And let's look at this. Let's review this, and let's see where it takes us,
Yeah.
And that's how it is with consciousness right now.
Let's seek truth, right?
Yeah.
So is part of what you're doing with Psi Games, is that to kind of make progress in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I've had several debates on, which are fun, debates are fun and great, is that, well, these functions tend to be very small. So a person will have psi functioning, but quite often it's on a very small level and it's hard to repeat and things of that nature. And then the other aspect is that so many people don't, believe that there's no real research or evidence for these things. And the truth is that they're just not reading the research and the data.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is, well, why is that? Because it's dry and it's not exciting, and it does, the average person just doesn't want to read it. Normally, people change when they're inspired to change, when they're motivated to change or to research or to find out more about it. So you get a quote about putting in a new pool, it's going to be $100,000, and you really want a pool for your family. And somebody says, well, if you go on YouTube, you could probably figure it out. It's not that hard. And it would only be like $20,000. And, and you're like, well, I really want a pool. So now you're inspired and motivated to go out there and like look at the research and like figure out how to do it on your own. And then you build a pool in your backyard. And so how do you get people to have those type of events? Normally we see that happen with near-death experiences. A person would almost die, and then they have this amazing experience. They come back and they say, well, what the hell was that? And then they start doing the research and find out that a lot of other people have had similar experiences, and it's been studied for a very long time. But if you just tell a person, yeah, there are these beings that will come to you and they will tell you stuff and they'll try to guide you, and then they'll move you back to your body, materialists will be like, you're crazy. That doesn't make any sense. And nobody's studied it before. And you're like, yeah, people have studied a lot of it, but they're not inspired. So they're not going to go and read the book. They just hold on to their own belief system. So Psi Games was this way of saying, well, through fun and play, everyone loves fun and play. How can we get more people to have this experience and to start diving into the research? We have to blow their mind. And I used the Roger Bannister effect. Roger Bannister is this track runner, and he believed that we could run faster than the 4-minute mile. And people were like, no, can't be done. All these people have tried it. It just isn't possible. He tried, and finally he beat it. And immediately after he beat it, in short order, a bunch of other people started beating it. So we went from, no, it can't be done, a bunch of people have tried and it's not possible, to all of a sudden one person made it possible, and now all these other people were doing it. So it meant that it was never a physiological limitation. It was always a psychological limitation that we had set on ourselves. But once you show people that something can be done, then they'll be inspired to take it up and try it on their own. And we've seen that on the Swimming the English Channel. That was the same way. I think the first guy the first guy who went to do that, who succeeded, it took him like almost a whole day of swimming. It was like 24 or 22 hours to get across the whole thing. And now the last person who did it in like an hour, or 2 hours.
Wow.
And so it's just like, but that was from like 18s, whatever, to now, so it's like been a long time. But the point is that one guy proved we were able to do it. The next guy proved that he could do it faster. The next guy proved that he can do it faster. So it just kept developing from there to where we are now. And so that's what we're trying to do with the Psi Games. We're trying to give mass exposure to a lot of people around the world in a very fun and inspirational and safe way, where people can feel safe exploring this. They can feel like they have a community. We can empower them to kind of do their own research and have their own journey, and do it in an ethical way. So that's what we're trying to do with the Psi Games.
So, most of us focus many of us anyway, focus on physical fitness and, education and other things, kind of training our bodies and our minds, but very few seem to really train on intuition and perception and awareness. Is this with Psi Games and with your experiences in general, are you suggesting that anybody can really train themselves to have these capabilities?
Yeah, that's what the science and the data shows, is that many people have these different abilities. Just to what level do they have these abilities? And then what level can we train these abilities? And we don't really know, because it has never been offered in a way like this where we can really test it and put it to the test and figure out what the benchmarks are. What is the 4-minute mile for remote viewing? People know of what we call now, the hip word, I guess, is the GOAT, right? Greatest of all times. So we have names in that hat, like Pat Price or Joe McMonagle for remote viewing, Ingo Swann. But, those are 3 people out of thousands. And we haven't really, and the new generation hasn't really seen those people do their thing. Pat Price is now passed on. Ingo Swann is now passed on. The only person who's still doing it is Joe McMonagle. I mean, I don't know if he remote views publicly a lot. So how do we see, like, what are we capable of? How do we push the envelope? And that's what we're trying to do with this. We've been in a very materialistic, reductionistic, logic-based world. And so we've really leaned for academia and like getting better at the math and the sciences and the literature, but we really haven't delved deep into our own multidimensionality when it comes down to the subtle and causal aspects of who we are, right? And that's what Psi Games and other things like it is trying to do, is to get us to be more in tune with our multidimensionality, so that we can connect with these other aspects of ourselves and then really step it up. And if we have any understanding of what more we can be, there seems to be a lot of information coming out about non-human intelligences and these beings that are, not physical beings. They may be plasmoids or some sort of plasma being, and that has some sentient intelligence, or sentient plants, plants having intelligence. And so we see that there are abilities to be more out there. It's just like, how does the average person, where do they start and how do they develop to that level? And that's what we're trying to provide for people.
What kind of tips can you share? I mean, obviously, we don't have time to go into all of it. You've got a whole, 3-day weekend, I think, where you talk about all of these things. So, but what highlights or tips could you give folks that are thinking about, like, where do I start with even developing these, bringing forward these gifts that we all are given, but how do I bring them to life?
Yeah, I think so there are some very basic things that I believe that are universal. One of them is belief. If you don't believe that it's possible, then chances are you'll hinder your own magic will keep you from finding the possibility. You get what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
in your disbelief, your ability to manifest is actually manifesting more disbelief. So if you just believe that it's possible, that's step number one. Step number two is that you have to have intention to see, or intention to develop, or intention to learn about these type of potentials and bring them forth in your life. And then, of course, once you have those, then there's some level of deed that you have to do, some physical action that you have to take. And so in my ninjutsu, we call this sanmitsu, which is this idea of thought, word, and deed. So I have to think it, then I have to speak it, and then I have to take some physical action or do some deed to bring it forth into my world. So in the same way, it's like the thought of belief, right? The intent the intent to see manifested, and then the actual actions that I take to see that manifested. And I think that's a really good place to start. And when people do that, they start to find these synchronicities. They start to find these little small miracles that pop up in their lives, and that's where it is. And if you look at any of the things that we know from the physical realm, from the left side of the brain, the logic brain, of what people tell us to bring forth things in our life. Okay, you want to be a lawyer, very left brain type of job or whatever. Well, first, son or daughter, you have to, if you really want to be a lawyer, you have to believe you want to be a lawyer, right? Or that you're going to be a lawyer. You have to believe it, right? If you keep running around here saying, I can't be a lawyer, I can't be a lawyer, then guess what? You're not going to be a lawyer. And then once you believe that you're going to be a lawyer, you have to set your intention and follow the guidelines of what it means to be a lawyer. So it means you're going to have to go to school, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to go to law school, and have to learn here. And then you have to do some stuff. You have to take these tests, these exams, and all that stuff. So we get it when it comes down to anything else in our physical plane, right? And it
Yeah.
really is the same way for the spiritual, And so it's no trainer in the world that you would ask, like, well, how do I get to be, the next weightlifting Olympian? They're just going to be like, well, sit on your couch, don't believe anything, and don't do anything, and you'll get there. It's like, oh, okay. Well, first you got to say, I can do it. Then you got to go out there and figure out what are the methods that I have to do it. And then you have to do those methods a lot and believe that you're going to be that champion. And one day, likely you will be that champion.
Very interesting. It just takes me back to this one time when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and it was after school, and a friend of mine was not there, and I had left I guess some important homework or something in his locker. I don't even remember why, but something I needed was in his locker, and there was another guy with me, and he was like, well, you're really gonna be in trouble about this. And I said, no, I can get into his locker. I'll pick the lock. And he's like laughing. And I just immediately, without hesitation, I knelt down next to it, and I put my ear up next to it, and I just turned it. And I stood up and I opened his locker. Um, my other friend was like, holy cow, how did you do that? And I didn't even know. I just did it.
Wow.
And after that, I always try to like do it again, and I could never do it again. I could never, but I could literally in that moment, I could hear the clicks of the lock. I don't know if I just tuned my hearing in somehow, but I could hear it. I heard it as clear as day as I was doing it. It was like click, go back around, click, go back around, click, and open up the locker. And I don't know. I just wonder if somehow like children somehow seem to have these capabilities more, and maybe it's kind of education takes it out of them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a saying in there, and this has kind of been proven in many different arenas. The people who make the most innovation in any type of field are not the people indoctrinated by that field. And if we look at children as the epitome of that, they have not been indoctrinated into the belief systems that it can only be done this way, or only this is the way it has to be done. So they break the rules all the time, and they find all levels of success. And then we as adults get involved, and we start, saying, oh, you can't do that. How did you do that? I've been a locksmith for 30 years and I can't do it the way you just did it. So that can't be possible. And now the kid starts thinking like, oh, well, if this guy's been doing this for 30 years and he's telling me maybe it was a fluke. And at that point, it's gone. Now you
Right.
try and you can't do it. And so that person who's indoctrinated in this way of belief then hinders your ability to really become something different. And so I definitely see that kids have these great potentials that then get stunted by our own belief system. I think that again, I don't have any hard evidence for this, but I think in some of the tribal cultures from the past, that was not as much done, because you had elders who were deeply immersed in the understanding of these things. And so they got supported. A friend of mine, his name is Skip Atwater. He tells a story about his mom was very into and understood this connection with spirit. So he says that he used to sleepwalk when he was a child, but actually he sometimes were astral projecting, and his mom understood that. So he talks about a story where he one time wet the bed, and his mom came in, and he was like, "Mama, I'm sorry I wet the bed, but I was actually, I know I was standing at the toilet. I was standing at the toilet using the bathroom." And he said, I know for a fact I was standing at the toilet. And she said, "That's okay, hon. That's okay, honey. Just next time, remember to bring your body with you." And so, and then that was the first, he said he had several encounters like that. So he never grew up believing that these things were impossible. He was being trained as how to understand them and control them better. And that type of exchange was one of his lessons that he still remembers to this day. And so instead of doubting him and saying, "Oh, that's a lie, you just got to get up, or I'm going to beat you," or something like that,
Yeah.
she reframed it. And because of him, the remote viewing program was developed and born in the Army, so and that was because he didn't have a predisposition of disbelief when these things came up in his intelligence career, where it would have been totally different if maybe he had been beaten for his peeing in the bed, and told that
Totally.
he was lying. So yeah, I think that children have this, and that's why I think we should be supporting them. That's why the Psi Games is free for children 6 to 14. And this year we'll have the first ever that I know of. Maybe somebody did it somewhere before, but I don't know it. The first ever Psi panel for children, run by children. So we have a group of young kids who are doing their own panel and leading the panel and talking about their experiences with Psi phenomena.
Wow. I was going to ask you about children and Psi Games. So thank you for going there. It's good to hear that you're focusing on that. I think the children are hopefully, I mean, they're our future and for
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. That was my realization. I'm going to all of these conferences and I'm listening to people in their 50s and 60s talk about the future. And then I'm looking around this room packed with hundreds of people, and there's not one child in there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Well, we're talking about the future, but there's no one here that represents the future. Everybody represents the now, the present. We're all 40 or above, or the past, So
Mostly the past,
the
right?
mostly the past. So I'm like, what's going on? What's the hang up here? Where's more people who are interested in this for the children? So we need to have children be involved in these. And I've been getting flack for that too. People are like, "Oh, you're trying to steal our kids away and test them and all this stuff." No, we're trying to give them a place to feel safe. We're trying to give them a place to be empowered. We're trying to have you do things with your child as a family that circles around this, so you learn and they learn together. That's what we want to do. That's what we're trying to do. And I get it. You're operating out of fear and perversion of what you believe, because that's what's been done in the past. But we have to start thinking from our hearts, and we have to start loving and being from our hearts, and realize that we can't let those fear things keep us down. It's good to be cautious, but we can't let fear rule our lives.
Unfortunately, that's the oldest trick in the book, right? It's to create the fear to keep us from vibrating at a higher level. Just shifting gears, give us an example of what is a Psi game? Like, what are the kids, like literally, what are they going to go through, or adults who might be there? Like, what is an actual game example that you can share with us?
Yeah, so Psi Games is, or you mean actual games themselves? So like
The games
last year.
themselves, like what actually are people going through as part of a game experience if they're attending the Psi Games?
Yeah, so last year what we did was, let's use Mindsight for example. We had a peg board, and this peg board had these like pegs on it, and they were different colors, right? So it was 6 different colors. It was like red. One peg would be red, one was yellow, one was blue, and then you had these donuts, these wooden donuts, and there were 6 of each of the colors, right? So there was 6 red, 6 blue, 6 yellow donuts. And so you had to sit up there as a participant. We call them perceptualists. You would have a blindfold on, a blindfold. We took a box, we took all the donuts, put them in the box, and shook it up so they were all mixed up. And then we gave you a 5-minute time limit to be able to, while you're blindfolded, basically separate the different colors and put them on the proper pegs, right? And our champion last year did that in, what did he do that in? She did that in we gave them 5 minutes, and our champion did it in 50 seconds. Right. And so at that time, she was the only one we knew that could do something like that. No, I mean, again, I had practiced all of these things, and I mean, 5 minutes was like, oh my God, that's not enough time, And
Right.
then this lady gets up there and she blows it out of the water, and she does it in 50 something seconds, and we were like, oh my God, that's crazy. Then so that was the Psi Games in August. I'm going to just go off on a quick tangent, but come back to it. That was the Psi Games in August of last year. In November of last year, only a few months later, I went to a Mindsight training that a friend of mine was hosting. And there was a lady who was inspired to come there because she was at the Psi Games. She had never done Mindsight before. She then got introduced to it at this training. She saw Dahlia do what she did, and she was inspired. And she put by the end of the training, she had patches on and a mindfold on. And do you know, she did it in the same speed as Dahlia did. So we went from not even knowing what the 4-minute mile was to finding the 4-minute mile. And within a couple of months, we have people who are exceeding that timeline. So it just goes to show, this thing, once you show people what can be done and give them the inspiration and the belief and change their belief system, then it's, sky's the limit at that point. So that would be an example of a game. We have rules, and so you have a time limit. You have, you can't take off the mask. You got to put it on the right peg, and you get points for that. And that would be a perfect example of one of our games. And people can actually see that game on online, so on our YouTube channel.
So what's going on? What's your theory? I mean, I don't expect you to have a scientific answer necessarily. Maybe you do, but what's happening physically with that young lady, and how is she able to do that?
Yeah, so mindsight is funny. The as far as we can tell as of right now, there's no standard understanding of what it exactly is. There's different teachers, and each one of those teachers have a different way of kind of explaining what's happening there, and some sound more plausible than others. Mindsight is broken down into, as far as we can tell, to two methods or two versions of mindsight that manifest. One is called intuitive mindsight, where you're not actually seeing the object, but for some reason you just know what it is, right? So I hold up a cup and you're blindfolded, and I say, "What do I have in my hand?" And you're like, "It's a cup." Okay. "What do I have in my hand?" "It's a pen." Okay. And I'm like, "Well, what are you seeing?" And you're like, "I'm not seeing anything. I just know exactly what you have. Something's telling me, or somehow I'm just connected." So that's one method. We call that intuitive mindsight. And then there's real time mindsight. And everybody explains their real time mindsight a little bit differently. Some people are like, it's like a static screen that starts to develop, and like the object will actually imprint on that screen, and then I see like a real pen. Some people are like, no, I see it clearly as a pen, the color, the shape, and we're not really sure what's going on there. Some of the teachers of this will express that it is your higher self that you're tapping into, and your higher self can see 360. It doesn't have a time or a space or a distance reference or anything like that. So it could be far away or close up, and you can do it that way. So that's wild. So I'm like, okay, cool. Then there's another group that says everything is vibrating. So, it's vibrating at a certain frequency, and that frequency is with our eyes. We see that vibration, and then our brain does what it does and gives us the image. And so when you blindfold yourself, that vibration can be picked up by other senses, and then it's basically learning a new language. So the same way I look at a cup, and somebody taught me that the word for that thing I'm looking at is cup. And then I say it to you, and because you know that language, you say, "Oh yeah, that's a cup." That whatever the vibration of a cup is, we learn what that vibration is, and then it doesn't matter if we see it or not, because we feel the vibration and we're able to distinguish that that's a cup. And some people say it's like your pineal gland or pineal gland, that because it has certain photoreceptors in it, which is like how we have our serotonin and our melatonin like gets created. Like when it's your sleep and your wake cycle. Somehow your brain knows when it's bright outside. And so through
Right.
this pineal gland, it releases this hormone, or this serotonin, to kind of wake you up. And then even if you're blindfolded or you're in a dark chamber, somehow at times your body can know when the sun goes down, and then it'll release this kind of melatonin and it puts you to sleep. So there are these different aspects, different ways that people describe this, but nobody really 100% knows scientifically what's going on.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Um, I was speaking with your partner Leo, and I was hoping to be able to attend this year to the Psi Games, but it's on a weekend that doesn't work for me, unfortunately. But I'm very intrigued, and I wonder, what is it that you're hoping to achieve? What's your mission with Psi Games?
Yeah. So my mission is a global mission. And the mission is to introduce and empower and develop psi phenomenon across the human species. Do it in a way that we build and there's three ways that we do that. We do that through inspiration and community, and then ethics. So we want to inspire people, we want to bring people together, and we want people to develop this in an ethical way, because the ethics piece is super important. What are we talking about? We're talking about being able to communicate without our words. We're talking about being able to see in any time and place. And then that becomes very strong ethical concerns. If we were to just take this in a bare bones, let's say militaristic environment, and say, um, I'm the CIA organization and I want to know about any American and on American soil. So we're going to tap all their phones and put, you know, cameras in all of their homes. Like you'd be like, no, that's violating my rights as a American citizen. That's violating my sovereignty. I don't want you in my personal space, right? And but then now we're saying, okay, all these people are psychic, and so now they can go anywhere in anybody's space, and it's just kind of the same thing. It's just one
Yeah.
is like more physical, and the other one's in this kind of this spiritual realm. Yeah, so we want to respect people's boundaries and their sovereignty in both spaces, and we have to really talk about that if we want to really develop these in a safe capacity, and that's where I'm coming from. So I want to see this as a means to help raise up the human species to our next level of evolution through this revolution of developing our psi ability through play and community.
Along those same lines, what would happen if schools begin teaching this alongside, math and science and phys ed and all that stuff? Like, what would our world look like?
Yeah, so there's precedent for that. China is doing it, India is doing it, and they're finding that kids are learning at astonishing rates. That kids are making better decisions because they're relying on their intuition more versus just logic. And so we see that we see more empathy and more sympathy, but specifically empathy for situations, so people are becoming more empathetic. So it's just like, I mean, like it's all of the things that, uh, if you're having a lot of problems in your life and you go through a therapist, they tell you to be right. Hey,
Right.
listen to your intuition more. Be more empathetic to people around you, and try to relate, try to feel what they're going through. Like all of those things that we're like cut off from because our society tends to be me, me, me. What can I get? What can I get? Oh, my tribe. What can my tribe bring me? What can I bring to the tribe? Versus like looking at the whole human species as a tribe, because you can really deeply connect with everybody on a spiritual and energetic means. Then it just becomes a different world. So I think that that's what we can have in schools, is that math becomes easier, science becomes easier, because I recognize that this information already exists. It's in the informational field. I talked to a scientist, Simon Dewan, and as crazy as this may sound, he was telling me about uh, when China was very strongly interested in researching this. One of the experiments they did was like this type of learning that didn't require you to actually go to a school or open up a book. And in one of the instances he talks about, one of the research projects that they did with this young man, is they wanted to see if he can learn how to play music without anybody physically teaching him how to play music. So this kid goes into a meditative state. I don't know where to find this paper, by the way, but Simon Dewan does, so maybe I'll ask him. Um, this kid would go into a meditative state, and then he would come out and he would be able to play music, classical music, no less. And so when they interviewed him and asked him, like, what did you do? He said, oh, I wanted to learn how to play Beethoven. So I went into my meditation, I found Beethoven, and I asked him to teach me. And because time works differently there, he taught me for a period of 9 years. But to the scientists, the kid was only meditating for like a half an hour.
Wow.
So then the kid comes out and he can play Beethoven, and proved it to these scientists, and they were just like, what is happening? Like, what, we got to understand what is going on. Now, this isn't everybody, but I suspect that's because everybody can't, they can't pinpoint how it's done, so we can't just send everybody there and have them do it. And then most people, even though you can teach them how to meditate, don't want to meditate, or have a trouble sticking with the program. I've seen that myself. People have come to me, well, how do you meditate? Well, here's how you do it. You sit down, you take some time, you just breathe. Your mind's gonna wander, so let it wander for a little while, and eventually it'll start to quiet down. And then they go and they do it for 5 minutes and they're like, yeah, my mind couldn't quiet down. I can't do this. And you're like, well, that's why it takes practice and stuff. So, they talking to Simon and others, they suspect, well, yeah, we could probably figure it out at some point, but would people really do what it takes to actually learn it? And I think that's
Yeah.
where like these games, the Psi Games would really come in handy, is that, you inspire people to just have fun with it and have a good time, and they see other people and then they want to do it. And, it still won't be everybody, but it'll be enough that we can make a real change in the human population.
Very cool. I want to be respectful for your time, so I've got just maybe one more question for you.
Okay.
If you could teach every person on earth just one skill that would improve their life, what would it be?
If I could teach every person one of the Psi skills or
Mental
just
skill. Yeah, mental skill.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely like, and this might be it's dualistic, right? It has it could be bad or it could be good in the wrong hands, which is why and I guess all this stuff actually.
Yeah.
It would be like psychokinesis. Um because I've taught kids mind sight, and that's really mind blowing. It's fun, right? Um but when I've taught kids psychokinesis, it brings a question, a worldview changing question. That is, that if I can move something with my mind, then that means that I'm connected with that thing on some deep level, right? And if I'm connected with this pen that I'm moving with my mind on this deep level, then what else am I connected to? You know?
Yeah.
And then that starts that gets rid of all the word salad or the lofty thinking of you are connected to everything. You should love everybody, like, and I mean, like, what does that mean to like some kid? Like, oh no, I'm not connected to, Billy Johnson who beats me up at the park every day. Like, we don't have anything in common. But when you start moving things without touching them and you start feeling plants and their energy, and you start working with healing or working with moving and put this game we call push and pull, where you use your energy to push and pull a person and you're not connected to them, but you see every time you move forward, they're moving forward. And when you're pulling back, they're pulling back. And you're like, what is happening? That would be, I think, once people have those experiences, it becomes so much harder to separate yourself from everyone else around you. You start really realizing, like, yeah, I am connected to everyone. And so if I'm able to heal someone or help someone's mood by using this energetic field, then it becomes a lot harder to hurt that person,
That's right.
because then I recognize that in hurting them, I'm actually hurting myself in some way. Maybe I might not be able to feel it right away, but it's being done because I truly am connected to everything around me. And I think that's a skill that would really change the world in a big way.
I love that answer, Hakeem. That's great. Hakeem Isler, thank you so much for joining the show. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and I commend you for what you're doing and focusing on the children in particular. They are our future.
Yes, absolutely indeed. And I appreciate this opportunity to spread the word about the Psi Games, and hopefully people of your audience. And we're going to give you a discount code so you can share it with everybody. It's in 4 weeks in Charlotte, North Carolina, July 31st through August 2nd. So we hope that more people can make it.
Awesome. And if you want to, what is your website? Go ahead and share that so folks can
hmm
can
So the
access.
website for the Psi Games is Psi, as in PSI. That's how it's spelled. PSIGamesInternational.com. And if people can't make it to the Psi Games and they would like to play games with their for themselves or with their kids, we have a new gaming platform called PsiGamesOnline.com. The games are free, they're fun, they're exciting. You're developing your Psi potential. And then if just for whatever random reason people just want to get in contact with me, my site is Hakim-Isler.com, Hakim-Isler.com.
Thanks, Hakeem Isler. It's been a pleasure meeting you. Please hold on as we wrap the show. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you could go back to the early days of companies like Apple, Tesla, or SpaceX, not because of the products they were selling at the time, but because you believed in the future they were trying to build. That's what Igniton is all about. Yes, today we create premium wellness products designed to support cognition, longevity, and restorative sleep and skin. And they're all backed by carefully selected ingredients and supported by clinical research. But for us, they're only the beginning. At Igniton, we believe the future of human wellness will be shaped not only by chemistry, but by a deeper understanding of how living systems organize, communicate, and maintain coherence. We're investing in the science, the research, and the technologies that could one day expand how we think about recovery, performance, and healthy aging. Every bottle we ship today helps fund that journey. When you choose Igni Cognition, Igni Longevity, Igni REM Sleep, or Igni Peptide Eye Serum, you're not simply buying a supplement. You're joining a community that believes the next great frontier in wellness is still waiting to be discovered. Some companies sell products, others build the future. We intend to do both. Learn more about Igniton's mission, explore the science, and become part of the Igniton community at igniton.com by using code ASHLEY to save 15% on your first purchase. That's igniton.com and code ASHLEY for 15% off without a subscription. Igniton is building the future of quantum wellness. Igniton, born from light, backed by science.
Thanks for listening to the Biohacking Standards, the foundations and fundamentals for a better you.